Okay, so I decided that I want to do a video about all the books that I read in January, but not only January. I want to try to do this monthly because I read so many books in January that I absolutely loved. So I thought that I would just share them, say how I rated them, although it doesn't really matter to me how I rate books. That's why I don't really use Goodreads as much as other people. I don't really write critics or anything. So yeah, but I thought that I'd just give some people, maybe just myself, I don't know, maybe it's just also to keep a sort of diary, book diary for this year. Because last year I actually thought that it's a shame that I didn't do it because I read so many lovely books, and this year in January I already read tons of books, so I thought I'd just do a video where I just show everyone what I read and say how I found the books. Okay, so let's go. So the first book I read on actually the 1st of January with my mom, we finally read a classic, which is The Alchemist by Paolo Coelho. I don't really know how to correctly pronounce it, I apologize. So obviously I already heard lots about The Alchemist, and it's been years since I wanted to read it, so I finally gave it a try. And so I'll just always start with the rating. Probably I'll rate out of 5 stars, so I would give The Alchemist 3.5 stars. So it's not bad. 3.5 for me is just, the writing was good, but it didn't blow me away because I heard so many people say The Alchemist was life-changing, it changed my life, and it certainly didn't for me. So it was a really nice book to start the year, I'd say, to have this, because it was all about dreams, about following your dreams, following omens, and I think it really helped me at the start of a new year to read a story like this. But yeah, overall I thought that the story was quite mainstream. It had lots of elements of The Little Prince by Antoine Saint-Exupéry. I don't really know why, but it really reminded me of it. It's also in the same category I saw, and I understand why. I thought it had just too many morals in it, and it was actually quite obvious most of the time, but I think it was really well narrated, that's for sure. My favorite character was definitely the salesman when he goes to let me see if I get this right. So when he first goes from Spain to, is it Morocco? I can't remember. I read too many books, I apologize. But when he goes to Morocco and works for a year with this salesman, I definitely love the salesman and his entire story. And I think that's the thing that I really appreciate about this book, is that I think all different people will relate to different characters in this story. For example, my mom definitely did not relate to the salesman, but it was really interesting to discuss it. And yeah, what I really liked about this character was that he was the opposite of the main character, that he did not want to follow his dreams and just always keep his dreams, because once you achieve dreams, it's just you have done the dream is done and you can't dream anymore. And everyone's different about this, but that's how I feel personally. So anyway, that was a pretty good book. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a must read, honestly, but it's a really lovely book and a really short read. So if you need to get into reading again, this is definitely a book to start. So the second book I read in January was one of my absolute favorite books of all time. It's a Japanese book, so warning, my favorite style of literature is Japanese lit, so I most read Japanese books since about 2 or 3 years. And the next book is one of the most famous Japanese children's book. It's called How Do You Live by Genzaburo Yoshino. And so the reason why I read this book is because obviously I'm a huge Studio Ghibli fan, and Hayao Miyazaki's very last movie that is coming out in summer this year is based on this book, because it was Miyazaki's favorite book, and he decided that his last work is going to be a story based on this. So that is why I read it, and what can I say? I gave it 5 out of 5 stars because it was it might be a children's book, but honestly, as an adult, I related so much to this, and I actually learned a lot. I would say maybe it has some similarity with The Alchemist, because they both have lots of morals in them, because this book is the purpose of this book is to educate children, to show them how to become a good human being. And I thought that it was absolutely beautiful, and while I read it, I actually thought that it was such a shame that I didn't read this book as a child growing up, because I could have really used this book. So basically, to not use too much time on this, it's about a 15-year-old boy named Copper. The reason why he's named Copper is so beautiful. It's basically because he's named after Copernicus. So basically, Copper realizes that as suddenly on a normal day that he is not the center of the world, and that everything in the world is not about him, but it's exactly the opposite. Is as soon as you realize that you're not the center of attention, you're not what matters, because you're just a single small particle in the universe. And that's exactly, the uncle then proceeds to tell him that that's what Copernicus that's what led Copernicus to find out that the world did not that the moon did not that the earth did not turn around the moon, and that it was the opposite. And that's exactly because he didn't just think that we were everything, that we were what matters, but that was the opposite. And I think it's just beautiful. And I actually learned a lot about this in this book. Since I'm a big fan of Napoleon, especially, there was a whole chapter, even 2 or 3, can't recall that well, but about Napoleon. And so yeah, I thought that was just beautiful, because I love Napoleon so much. And another thing that made me love this book even more is the scenery. So basically, it took me back to places as a child that I completely forgot. For example, in winter, so basically he's ill at a point where he misses school for about 4 weeks and just is at home as a kid, and he has this thought about not wanting to go back to school because he would have to confront all his friends again. And I totally forgot that I had this exact same feeling, and I was this child again. And that's why I really love this book. It's because it is such a detailed and such a good point of view of a child that I really think that Miyazaki, I'm so excited about the new Ghibli movie, because I think it's the perfect Miyazaki movie. If it's going to be like in the book, I already pictured some scenes that would be very Ghibli-like. For example, the food scene with the fried tofu. So basically, there's a kid in his class that is quite poor, and his parents basically own a fried tofu shop, and he always eats fried tofu every single day in school and gets quite bullied for it. And I can already imagine this to be a Ghibli scene soon. So that's why there are so many things in this book that makes it perfect. Also at the end, they talk about Buddha statues that were actually made by Greeks, and I didn't even know that, so I learned a lot from this book. And what a lovely book. As a child, I grew up with The Little Prince because I'm French, but Japanese people growing up with this book, that's just lovely. I asked my Japanese teacher, not Japanese teacher, I asked another Japanese friend of mine if they read it as a child, and they told me yes. So it's a really famous book, and what a joy to read it. Can only recommend it before the movie comes out. It's maybe better to read the book first, although some people always say they're disappointed because things are not like in the book, so I don't know, make your own opinion of it. But it's my favorite book now. The third book that I read this year was the Pachinko Parlour by Elisa Shua du Sapin, I think. That's how her name is pronounced. It's a really famous book at the moment. A lot of people talk about it, and yeah, I was just really intrigued about the title, the Pachinko Parlour, because Pachinko is a really famous sort of arcade game in Japan, and I thought that was really interesting. And so this is maybe quite personal. I gave this book 5 stars, 5 out of 5 stars, but the reason is not necessarily because of the story, and not necessarily because I thought it was life changing in a way for me, but maybe not for other people. It's just that I related so much with the main character, and the reason why I related is because they had so many elements in it that was just me. I really thought while reading, is this really my story in a way? I don't want to go into too many details to spoil the book, but basically the main character is a woman, I think in her almost 30s, who has her master's, who studied in Switzerland in the French part, but also talks about Zurich, which is funny because obviously I'm from Zurich as well. So first of all, this is like the first connection. She speaks French and Japanese as well, so I'm learning Japanese, and she talks about university and how she struggles with universities in Switzerland, which I relate to, and she basically goes on a vacation in Japan and becomes a nanny for a little girl. I think her name is Mieko, if I remember correctly. Anyway, and she does all these activities in Tokyo with her, and has beautiful discussions with this little girl. And they talk about Heidi, which is my favorite story and my favorite anime growing up, and I'm still watching Heidi sometimes if you grew up with this cartoon. And they talk about it because it's so famous in Japan, and it was also really famous in France, and that's why I watched it a lot growing up. And they talk about it, and then they even go to Heidi Land, not Heidi Land, it's called Heidi Village, I believe. It's in in which prefecture is it? I don't remember. Is it Yamaguchi? Probably. I don't know. Anyway, they go there, and yeah, I just was really excited about it because I love this. And also, she had other cartoon references that I had too growing up in the book, so I really love that. And I thought the writing was very simple, and I just thought it was a really cute book, and could only recommend it. If you want a short story that is fun to read, definitely give it a go. Okay, next book. So the next book I read is also very famous. It's Heaven from Mieko Kawakami. So I haven't read Breasts and Eggs yet. I know it's her most famous book, I believe. This one came out in 2022, so it's very recent, but oh my goodness, was it depressing and beautiful and amazing. I would give it probably 4.5 stars. It was really fast read as well for me. It's basically about bullying, but my goodness, is it a well narrated story, and so shockingly going into details about being bullied. And I think that it's a very, in Japan especially, bullying in school is on another level. As far as I read from other books, I mean, I have read quite a lot of books that just are about bullying as a topic, so it really shows that it's a thing there. And it's basically about a student, a high school student, who has a lazy eye, and he becomes friends with this other girl that is also being bullied for being an outsider, for not dressing well, for just having her own problems basically. And they both are getting bullied at school, and they start exchanging letters to each other, meeting once a month in different places, and it goes into very detailed bullying scenes that are really tough. And it talks about the topic of being bullied. So there's the most important chapter in the book, which is basically about one of the boys that is bullying him, and they talk in front of a hospital together, and he asks him, he has the guts to tell him, to ask him why everyone bullies him. And they have this really deep discussion about bullying and two completely different aspects on the topic, and it really makes you think about this a lot. And yeah, as someone who also has been bullied at school, I, not on this level obviously, but yeah, especially the ending is traumatizing. But yeah, I believe this is such an important book to read as a student when you go to school. I think it really is life-changing, so also the writing is beautiful, so I will definitely read Breasts and Eggs. Murakami also recommends this writer, so anything that Murakami recommends, I read absolutely. So yeah, love that book. Continuing on my Japanese journey, I read Diary of a Void in a day, basically, on a bus, on the train, at home. It was such a hilarious day. I just will always remember that day. It's by Yagi. I would give it 4 stars out of 5. It's an absurd Japanese story. It reminds me of Convenience Store Woman, if you have read it, by Sayata Murata. I apologize, I forgot the name, but Murata is definitely her last name. In any case, it's the most absurd story, and it's just so absurd that it becomes so funny. And it's also about the work topic, because obviously, if you know, in Japan especially, life is about work in Japan, and it talks about the entire work culture and also about being a woman in an office. And anywho, basically this woman, I believe she's in her 30s, decides one day that she is pissed off about all her co-workers and that she just doesn't want to do all the tasks, like bringing coffee to them every single day. So she just invents a lie, and what a lie. She just tells them that she is pregnant, which she is definitely not, since she is single. And it just becomes an entire journey of her being pregnant, and the lie, this little white lie, becoming the biggest thing. And it is so extreme that at a point in this book you just start to ask yourself, is she actually pregnant or is she not? And yeah, it's just so funny. So basically her lie, she's so caught up in her lie that she signs up to pregnant women gym classes and have her meetings with them, I think every day or maybe weekly, where they just talk together about being pregnant even though she's not. So it's so absurd. I love the book. I can only recommend it if you want to have a laugh. So yeah, Diary of a Void, amazing. Okay, the next book, If Cats Disappeared from the World. Look, it wasn't life-changing as well, like The Alchemist for me. It needs a lot for me for a book to really have this, especially when there is a moral. And the thing about this book is I kind of knew how it would end from the start. It wasn't a big twist, so it wasn't as interesting, but the concept was definitely something very peculiar. So basically it's about a man who has terminal cancer and has 1 or 2 days to live. And he only lives alone with his cat, and suddenly the devil arrives in form with a Hawaiian shirt. So I think, if I remember correctly, he calls him Aloha. And the devil arrives and he tells him that he can prolong his life, he can make his life longer. So if he takes away something from this world, for everyone, not just him, a concept, a thing, he can have 1 day more every single time. So on the first day, he takes away the phones, so nobody has phones. And every day he has to decide, does he want more life, or does he want to keep this thing in the world? So then there's movies. What if movies would disappear from this world? And it's all about these beautiful discussions about things that it's just really interesting. So I don't want to spoil what happens because it's already pretty obvious to me. But on the last day, it's if cats would disappear from this world. So he has to make this choice. Does he want to die now, or does he want to make cats disappear from this world. And it's really, really a great book. I wouldn't say you have to read it, but it's a lovely idea and a lovely thought, I think, to have, especially for me as a cinephile and a person who loves music. I think it's really interesting to think, what if movies wouldn't exist? Which I personally cannot imagine. But yeah, definitely something I loved. Right, what's the next book I read? Okay, Murakami is my favorite author of all time. And I haven't read one of his bestsellers yet, so Kafka on the Shore is my favorite book in the world. And I haven't read Norwegian Wood, and so I read Norwegian Wood. What can I say? It's 5 out of 5. Obviously, very shocking. Sometimes some stories. The piano teacher, I don't want to spoil it, but boy does this story have shocking scenes. But what I really love about it is that we get a point of view of a young man's life at university that is so detailed that you really understand the other sex better. So I know he's criticized for not writing women well, which I don't want to go into too much. I don't want to go into that theme further, but basically I think he writes characters so well, and I really was that boy at university for the course of 400 pages or something. And it's about young love, about love stories that are actually feeling very real, and not in a very romantic, cheesy way, but really, yeah, it felt, that's all I have to say, they felt raw and real. It's about suicide as a topic as well. Obviously, it has all the Murakami elements that you can imagine, from all the music references, cinema references, all the sexual scenes, and it just all goes so well together. There's nothing more I can say. I will definitely read this again at some point, and I absolutely loved it. Yeah. Next book I read was Outline, so it's the first from a trilogy by Rachel Cusk, I believe her name is. Listen, I did not like it at all. I give it 1 star out of 5. I hated it. I'm very sorry. I can understand why people would like it. Maybe the writing seems good. It's definitely a beautiful writing style that kind of reminds me of Clara Kagan, if you know her, or Keegan. I apologize, I really am bad with name pronunciation, but it's basically 10 short stories about a writer doing a writing course in Greece. I just thought it was absolutely boring, because there is no real story. Not that not having a real plot is a problem in books, but in this one, definitely. It's just, I didn't care about these people's lives. Honestly, while reading, I just thought, why on earth would I care about that? So it's just basically, I didn't like the story and thought, to me, the book was a waste of time. So 1 star out of 5. Okay, the next book I read was Banana Yoshimo's Sleep, which is quite a famous Japanese book. It's the first Banana Yoshino book I read. It's basically 3 short stories on sleep and different ways of not sleeping, sleepwalking. I thought it was alright. I would probably give it 3 out of 5 stars. I really liked the last story about wait, what was it again? I don't remember. Wait. Yeah, so I really liked the last story, which is about a woman who is in a relationship with a man who has a wife, but his wife is in a coma. And it's a really weird concept of her sleeping all the time, basically 24/7, sleeping so much, which parallels to his actual wife also being kind of asleep in a way. You can't really call it state of sleep, but yeah, so it really is a funny parallel. And also the second story about her having these dreams about this strange relationship she had with a woman. It's a really weird story, but basically she has dreams about her and realizes that she actually died, and it's in a kind of surrealistic sort of writing style, kind of a David Lynch meets Murakami. Well, you can't really compare these two because one is a filmmaker, so it has Murakami elements but not as great, I would say. And it's an interesting thing. I need to read more Banana Yoshino books to make an opinion, I think, because these 3 short stories just weren't enough for me. And also I really like his name, Banana Yoshino. Yeah, but it's not bad. Maybe some people could tell me what other book is worth reading from Yoshimoto, not Yoshino. Yoshino is the other book I read. So yeah. Last but not least, I read the best book I've ever read this month, which is, Norwegian Wood and How Do You Live were close, but this is the best book I read this month. And it's Lonely Castle in a Mirror by Mizuki Tsujimura. Perfect. It's a perfect book. So I basically recommended it to my friend in Paris, and he also read it. And he, what he wrote to me on WhatsApp was, "Is this your biography?" Which I thought was really funny. So basically, it's a surreal, also very Murakami kind of wind-up bird chronicles, which is also, it also says here. So it's a grim sort of fairy tale mixed with surrealism and very Japanese as well. Also about bullying, not only about the entire school system, about death, about illness, about even sexual abuse. And not having friends, being lonely. It is perfect. I can't express how perfect this book is. It's just, the anime movie just came out in Japan, and I'm so sad that we don't have it internationally yet, but as soon as it is out there, I will be so excited to watch it because it looks quite promising. I watched the trailer. Anyway, it's about a girl named Kokoro, and she doesn't go to school anymore because she has been bullied and stays at home all the time, which I personally relate to because I had the same thing where I stayed at home, basically in my room for a year, and didn't go to school when I was about 15, as well as her. So I 100% related to that, what it feels like. I think parents and adults can't really understand how you feel when you have this feeling about, you feel bad because you're not going to school, but you also don't want to go, and then you're alone all the time, and you start to have anxiety, social anxiety, and I absolutely related to that. And then they enter this magical world, all 7 kids that are not going to school, and stay in this castle for an entire year, and it's the most beautiful story I have ever read, and especially the ending is a twist that is crushing. And it also is about video games, which is a very dear topic of mine, because I also grew up with video games because it was my entire childhood. I'm not the only one, but yeah, the first thing I had was a Nintendo DS, exactly like they described in the book, if I remember correctly. So I loved it. I loved every single part of it, and I never wanted this book to end. And if this is the case, then it's just an amazing book. And I did cry at the end because it was just perfect. I also just loved that they started doing their own things, basically their own kind of school. It also has Harry Potter elements, which is funny because the book actually mentions Harry Potter because one character looks like Ron Weasley. So if you're a Harry Potter fan, Murakami fan, fairy tale fan, and yeah, if you're interested about this topic of school, being a child, being not a normal child maybe, you'll love this book, honestly. I'm not kidding. So yeah, those were all the books. I think I have more, but honestly, I think the video would be too long. So anyway, those were the books I read this month. What a month that was. I enjoyed reading so much, and I'll probably leave my Goodreads in the bio and all other links, but as I said, I don't really rate books that much, but if anyone is interested, let me know. And yeah, if anyone watches this and has read these books, let me know what you thought of them, and I can't wait to see what I read next. And yeah, that's it.